Hello. Yes, hello. You've decided to listen to a story about Greek myths, which means either you love mythology or you're so desperately tired that you'll accept being bored into unconsciousness by the sound of my voice. Either way, excellent choice. Tonight's theme, boring Greek myths for sleep. Not the kind you read in flashy children's books where gods sparkle like they're auditioning for a shampoo commercial. No. Forget the castles made of clouds. Forget Zeus hurling lightning bolts like a teenager discovering pyrotechnics. Forget the golden temples glowing in the sun. What you're about to get is the mythological version of lukewarm soup. Gentle, slow, edible, and specifically designed to send you into unconsciousness before you ever hear the ending. Perfect. And before we dive in, yes, here comes the shameless part. If you enjoy this kind of historical insomnia treatment, if you want more boring myths, forgotten chronicles, and the soothing reminder that the past was basically people struggling with bad food, bad hygiene, and bad luck, then you know what to do. Like the video. Subscribe. You'll never regret it, mainly because you'll never remember it. By the time you wake up tomorrow, you'll have only a vague memory of a voice telling you about some shepherd who accidentally annoyed a minor sea god. Still, you'll have supported the channel, and that's what truly matters. Thank you, in advance, truly. Now, you. Yes, you. Lying in bed right now with your phone precariously balancing on your chest, pretending you're not going to drop it on your face in approximately 6 minutes. Or maybe you're the sophisticated type, with earbuds jammed into your skull, lying in total darkness like a corpse waiting for instructions. Either way, make yourself comfortable. Turn off that light. Put the phone down, screen face down so you don't suddenly blind yourself like an unfortunate Greek who stared too long at Apollo. Wiggle around until you find that one magical position you'll abandon in 3 minutes when your arm goes numb. Close your eyes, or half close them in that creepy way, and let yourself sink into the mattress, which is probably lumpy but at least not made of straw and goat skins, unlike the beds of most ancient Greeks. Congratulations, you're already luckier than an Athenian farmer with back problems. And now, the transition. This is the moment. You've done the ritual. You've adjusted, sighed, maybe rolled your eyes at me, and now the journey begins. So, congratulations. You've just woken up in ancient Greece. The air is colder than you expected. Your back is sore because you slept on something that calls itself a bed but feels more like a punishment. You hear the faint sound of animals outside, goats screaming in the distance like broken trumpets. The smell, a mix of wood smoke, damp earth, and the kind of human sweat that has never heard of deodorant. You're awake now. You're alive in the myth. Welcome. You wake up, though wake up is generous. It's more like you crawl reluctantly out of the shallow ditch called sleep. Your bed, if we can call it that without being sued for false advertising, is a bundle of straw wrapped in a sad excuse for fabric. Imagine a futon bought secondhand from a goat. That's your mattress. The blanket? Scratchy wool that smells like it has a part-time job as an animal. Which, to be fair, it did, very recently. You shift, trying to find a position that doesn't feel like punishment. There isn't one. Welcome to the morning. The air is cold, sharper than you expect, and there is no snooze button. Unless you count the rooster outside, which doesn't understand snooze, or personal space, or mercy. It screams like it's auditioning for a metal band. This is your alarm clock, a bird that hates you personally. You bury your head under the wool, but the wool hates you too. It itches your face like 1,000 tiny knives, and not even poetic knives, just blunt, irritating ones. You try to stand. The floor is packed earth, uneven, slightly damp. Your toes complain, but they're not in charge. You grope for sandals, which are just bits of leather pretending to be shoes. They flop against your feet with all the dignity of a wet fish. The straps bite your skin, but congratulations, you're dressed for success. Hygiene, you ask. Forget about a hot shower. Forget about toothpaste commercials with people grinning at you with chemically whitened teeth. Here in ancient Greece, hygiene is a basin of cold water that looks like it gave up on being cleaned several weeks ago. You splash it on your face and it feels less like refreshing morning ritual and more like punishment for a crime you don't remember committing. Soap? If you're lucky, a chunk of lye that burns your hands like it's trying to negotiate with your sins. Otherwise, you just rub your skin until it turns red and call it a day. Now about your breath. You dream of minty freshness, but what you get is not that. Tooth care is optional, rare, and involves twigs or rough cloth, which mostly just remind your gums that they exist. You chew a branch to disguise the fact that you slept with your mouth open and now taste like death. Congratulations, you're kissable in the way a dead fish is kissable. Breakfast? Don't get excited. You're not walking into a cafe with flat whites and almond croissants. No, your feast is bread. Hard bread. Bread that doubles as a weapon in case of burglary. If you're lucky, you soak it in wine. Yes, wine for breakfast. Not glamorous wine, not the kind people today write poetic reviews about, but sour, watered-down stuff that tastes like someone left grapes out in the sun for too long. Still, it makes the bread edible. Sort of. You gnaw at it like a desperate rodent and pretend it's satisfying. Outside, the village stirs. Goats bleat with the conviction of professional mourners. Chickens scratch the dirt, dust rising like tiny storms around their ridiculous bodies. A neighbor coughs, a deep, rattling sound that suggests they'll either survive or drop dead by lunch. The smell in the air is a cocktail of smoke, manure, and something vaguely sour you decide not to identify. This is morning in ancient Greece. Unpleasant, inevitable, and deeply unimpressive. And yet, here's the strange thing. For them, it's normal. Nobody complains that the bed feels like punishment furniture from a medieval torture museum. Nobody demands better sandals. Nobody invents toothpaste. This is just life. You, of course, are soft and spoiled by central heating, streaming services, and the ability to complain online. But here, the only outlet for your frustration is muttering to yourself while chewing your breakfast rock. You look around the room, which is not much of a room. 4 walls of mud brick, a small window covered with something that looks like fabric but smells like disappointment. A jar in the corner, filled with olive oil, because olive oil is basically the duct tape of ancient Greece. Food? Olive oil. Medicine? Olive oil. Lighting your home? Olive oil. Slipping dramatically while trying to carry a jar? Olive oil. It's everywhere. It's everything. It's the Beyoncé of the household. Indispensable, versatile, and sometimes overrated. Your family shuffles about. They look tired because everyone looks tired. No one has had 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep in this century. Babies cry, men grunt, women mutter, and someone always has a limp. They're preparing for the day. And so are you, whether you like it or not. There is no work from home option. The home is the work. So you take a deep breath, choke slightly on the mix of smoke and goat, and prepare yourself for whatever passes as a day in this charming, unhygienic, and profoundly boring slice of mythological life. Because remember, this is a myth. Somewhere out there, gods exist, strutting about on Mount Olympus, throwing tantrums like spoiled children with superpowers. But down here, you're just a person with bad sandals and a worse breakfast, pretending that this is normal. And it is, for now. The sun has barely dragged itself over the horizon, and already the day begins. You step outside, blinking like a mole forced into daylight. The sky is clear, blue, unpolluted, which sounds romantic until you remember that unpolluted means there's no convenient smog filter to keep the sun from stabbing you directly in the eyeballs. Ancient Greek mornings, brought to you by squinting. The village is alive in its own chaotic way. Neighbors shuffle about, not with the cheerful hum of productivity, but with the groggy resignation of people who know today will be exactly like yesterday, and tomorrow will be suspiciously identical too. One man sharpens a tool, another mutters at a donkey. Children run barefoot and shout at volumes that suggest they're auditioning for thunder. The air is full of sounds. Hammers on wood, goats complaining. Someone sneezing so loudly it echoes off the hills like a bad omen. You, unfortunately, have to work. And work here doesn't mean sitting at a desk, scrolling through emails, pretending to be busy while secretly shopping for shoes. No. Work here means field labor, the kind that makes your back ache just by thinking about it. Your family drags you toward a patch of land optimistically called the farm. In reality, it's a stretch of dirt sprinkled with rocks, weeds, and the faint hope that something edible might one day sprout. Tools are primitive, which is a polite way of saying useless. A wooden plow that looks like it was designed by someone who hated farmers personally. A hoe that splinters in your hand. And you, sweating already, are meant to coax life out of the earth with this comedy equipment. The sun climbs higher, heating your neck, and you think longingly for sunscreen, of wide-brimmed hats, of literally any modern convenience. Instead, you smear olive oil on your skin, because once again, olive oil is the duct tape of the Mediterranean. Does it work? Not really. Does it make you smell like yesterday's salad? Absolutely. Meanwhile, the animals watch you. Goats stare with their creepy rectangular eyes, silently mocking you. Chickens dig in the dirt as if they're performing better agriculture than you ever will. Even the donkey sighs dramatically, as though disappointed in your effort. Nothing here respects you, least of all the earth. Lunch is a fantasy. You don't stop at midday for tacos, sushi, or anything Instagram-worthy. No. If you're lucky, someone tosses you another hunk of bread. Maybe there's a scrap of cheese, aged to the consistency of a brick. You gnaw on it while pretending it's delicious, when in reality, your jaw files an official complaint. You wash it down with, you guessed it, more wine water. Congratulations, you're a peasant sommelier, forced to drink vinegar disguised as culture. Your coworkers, also known as family, barely talk. Conversation here is minimal, mostly grunts, sighs, and the occasional curse directed at rocks. Everyone is tired. Everyone is sunburned. Everyone is busy not dying of malnutrition. You long for small talk about TV shows, but there are no shows, only goats. If you want entertainment, you stare at the clouds and pretend they look like gods. Spoiler, they don't. They just look like lumps of white floating overhead, as if even the sky is bored. Occasionally, someone tells a story, a myth, not the kind with epic battles or divine drama. Those are for festivals, for priests, for fancy people in cities. Here, the stories are practical, recycled, told by tired voices. Don't walk near that grove, it belongs to a nymph. Translation, don't trespass on the neighbor's land. Don't fish in that part of the river, it's sacred to Poseidon. Translation, don't start fights over resources. Myth here is less about wonder and more about low-budget conflict resolution. You work until your muscles scream. The sun burns. The dust sticks to your sweat. Your sandals rub your skin raw. You dream of quitting, of calling HR, of submitting a strongly worded email. But there is no HR. There is only survival. You keep working because the alternative is hunger, and hunger is worse than boredom. By late afternoon, your hands are blistered, your shoulders ache, and your body feels like it is aged 50 years. You stare at the field, which looks exactly as hopeless as it did in the morning, and you wonder if this is all there is. And yes, it is. This is Greek myth from the bottom up. Not God soaring across the sky, but you, a mortal, sweaty, tired, and ignored by history. No one will sing songs about your plowing technique. No one will carve your name in marble. You will go to bed exhausted, wake up sore, and repeat it all until you die. Truly heroic. But don't worry, evening is coming, and with it, the illusion of rest. After the fields, you stumble back into the house, dragging your body like a broken cart. The word house deserves quotation marks because what you're entering is less home sweet home and more mud brick rectangle with personality issues. Walls cracked like dry skin, roof that leaks whenever Zeus sneezes, and a floor that is technically dirt but generously described as earthy. Interior design here is minimalism, not because it's trendy, but because you literally can't afford furniture. The room smells like smoke, goat, and whatever someone dropped in the corner 3 days ago. Light comes in through a hole, pretending to be a window. Mosquitoes drift lazily, buzzing in your ear like they're the opening act for Insomnia. You sit on a stool, which wobbles suspiciously, and remind yourself this is normal. At least no one invented IKEA yet, so you can't feel cheated about the missing screws. Now, clothing. You wear what can only be described as one size fits no one. A tunic, shapeless, scratchy, more sack than style. Fabric is wool or linen, woven with love by someone whose true enemy is comfort. It hangs on you like a wet towel. In summer, it's too hot. In winter, it's too cold. And fashion? Forget it. Colors fade, hems fray, and if you're lucky, you own a belt to pretend it's flattering. Spoiler, it's not. Everyone here looks like they dressed in the dark with materials stolen from a scarecrow. Footwear? Still the sad leather sandals, gnawing your ankles like angry squirrels. Socks don't exist. Blisters do. Every step is a reminder that your feet hate you. You dream of sneakers, of memory foam, of orthopedic inserts, but those belong to a future where people have the luxury of inventing comfort. For now, it's straps, blisters, and a faint smell of defeat. Illness hovers over the household like an uninvited guest who refuses to leave. Someone is always coughing, wheezing, scratching. Fevers come and go like seasonal sales, except there are no discounts, only funerals. Medicine? Olive oil, herbs, prayers. A neighbor swears by garlic, another by wine, another by sacrificing chickens to whichever god is listening. Doctors exist, but mostly in cities, and even then they're more experimental than reliable. Picture a man in a robe suggesting you balance your humors by vomiting, bleeding, or applying leeches. Comforting, isn't it? Children run about barefoot, sticky, loud, and constantly on the edge of disaster. They fall into mud, chase chickens, chew on questionable objects, and somehow survive. Their laughter fills the house, but so does their screaming, their crying, their demands. You love them, of course, but mostly in the abstract, in the way you love the idea of future laborers who will someday take over the field so your back can finally stop hurting. Meals are a family event, which sounds cozy until you realize the menu hasn't changed since yesterday or last month. Bread. More bread. Maybe olives. Maybe beans. Maybe fish if the gods are generous and the fishermen not too drunk. Everything tastes vaguely burnt because cooking here is more fire hazard than culinary art. You chew slowly, not to savor, but to delay the disappointment of finishing too soon. And always, always the wine water. You drink because it's safer than untreated water, but it still tastes like regret. Night approaches, and with it, the insects. Mosquitoes, gnats, tiny winged demons that view your exposed skin as an all-you-can-eat buffet. You slap at them, they laugh, they bite again. Nets exist, but good luck affording one. You lie in bed scratching, itching, wondering if this is mythological punishment or just life. Spoiler, both. The house quiets as exhaustion spreads. Parents mutter prayers to household gods, small clay figures tucked in corners, guardians of the hearth. You wonder if they ever listen. Probably not. Maybe they're too busy watching Zeus chase yet another mortal woman disguised as a swan. divine priorities. And then the fear creeps in. Not monsters, not hydras, not Cerberus. Real fears. Famine, sickness, raids, taxes. The shadows of everyday survival loom larger than any myth. You curl under your scratchy blanket, listening to the coughs of your family, the distant howl of dogs, the crackle of the dying fire. This is home. This is comfort. This is the myth behind the myth. A life that is more exhausting than heroic. And tomorrow? Tomorrow will look exactly the same. Evening creeps in slowly, and after the endless grind of the fields and the misery of the household, you might think there's time for relaxation. Spoiler, relaxation doesn't exist here. What exists is less work, which is as close as you'll ever get. Entertainment in ancient Greece is not Netflix, not scrolling endlessly through your phone, not even doom-scrolling news that makes you regret being alive. Entertainment is sitting, sometimes standing, occasionally staring. People gather in the central square, which is really just a patch of flattened dirt with delusions of grandeur. The smell of smoke and manure floats through the air like an unwelcomed guest. Children chase each other, shouting like tiny barefoot maniacs. Men argue loudly about nothing. Boundaries, goats, whether the gods are in a good mood today. Women cluster together, trading gossip about who has the best olive oil or whose cousin's cousin might have sneezed near the temple. Riveting stuff. Religion is woven into every part of this routine. You don't just live, you live under surveillance. Not by cameras, but by gods with bad tempers. Every step feels like it requires a prayer. You light a small lamp, mumble to Hestia for the hearth, to Hermes for luck, to Athena for wisdom, even if the most complicated decision you'll make tonight is whether to sit or lean against a wall. Gods are everywhere, in the trees, in the rivers, in the wind that makes you sneeze at inconvenient times. Imagine living with the constant anxiety that your clumsy trip over a rock might be interpreted as divine disrespect. That's religion here. Exhausting customer service with immortals. Festivals, though, are the closest thing to actual fun. Every so often, the village hosts a small celebration, and suddenly the square bursts with activity. Music, not orchestras or pop hits, but pipes wheezing like someone strangling a duck, and drums that sound suspiciously like pots being abused. Still, people dance, stomping in circles, arms linked, eyes gleaming with the reckless joy of forgetting their daily misery for half an hour. Food appears. Bread, again, but at least it's warm. And sometimes there's meat, if an unlucky goat or pig was volunteered. You join in, awkwardly, pretending to enjoy it, but really just marveling at how desperately humans cling to joy, even when joy looks like repetitive stomping and chanting off-key. Compared to your modern weekend, movies, shopping, drinks, memes, this feels prehistoric, which it is, but you can't deny the strange charm. Everyone together, everyone loud, everyone briefly pretending life isn't a cycle of sweat, blisters, and disappointment. Then comes the storytelling. Old men, voices raspy like broken flutes, gather the crowd and begin. Myths spill out. Not polished epics, but lopsided tales, half-remembered, full of gaps. One man insists Heracles killed a lion with his bare hands. Another swears it was with a club. A third insists the lion was actually his neighbor's very aggressive dog. Nobody corrects anyone because accuracy isn't the point. The point is keeping the stories alive, feeding the children's imagination, filling the night with something other than silence and insects. And the children listen, wide-eyed, believing every word. To them, the gods are real, walking the earth, punishing, rewarding, meddling. To you, spoiled with hindsight, it feels absurd. You know these myths are cautionary tales, metaphors, cultural glue. But here, they are truth. And truth shapes every step. If someone claims a nymph lives by the river, you avoid that river, not because you believe in the nymph,
but because everyone else does, and nobody wants to be the idiot who offends a possibly real, possibly imaginary immortal. Social life is small, repetitive, but vital. Without it, despair would swallow you whole. You greet neighbors you secretly dislike. You smile politely at relatives who borrow tools and never return them. You laugh at jokes that died centuries ago. It's theater, low-budget theater, where everyone plays the role of "we're fine," while silently wondering if the harvest will kill them this year. Marriage, of course, is not about love. It's about survival, land, alliances. You look at couples and see not romance, but contracts in human form. Affection exists, sure, but it's practical affection. The kind that says, "I'll share my bread with you because starvation is less depressing with company." Romantic candlelit dinners? Try candlelit rooms where you both chew stale beans in silence. Still, beneath the boredom and routine, there's a strange strength. People endure. They laugh, even if the joke is terrible. They dance, even if it's stumping in circles. They pray, even if the gods ignore them. Life here is hard, repetitive, disappointing, and somehow stubbornly still alive. That's the myth beneath the myth. Not the glamorous stories of heroes and gods, but the unrecorded resilience of ordinary mortals. You sigh, leaning against a wall, pretending to be interested in yet another story about Zeus disguising himself as farm equipment to seduce someone. You know the drill. Tomorrow will be the same. The gods will misbehave, the priests will preach, the neighbors will gossip, and you'll keep trudging through this very boring, very human slice of history. And the night keeps creeping closer.
Night is falling, but don't think that means safety. Darkness here doesn't tuck you in like a warm blanket. It presses down on you like a weight. The shadows stretch, and with them, the real fears arrive. Not the exciting ones, the minotaurs, the harpies, the dramatic monsters of storybooks. No, the fears that actually keep you awake are smaller, meaner, and far more boring. Sickness, theft, violence that makes no sense and never ends. Let's start with sickness, because it's always lurking. A cough here is never just a cough. It's a reminder that you might be planning your funeral next week. Fevers rise like surprise guests, sweating you into dehydration while your family argues whether it's Apollo punishing you or just bad luck. And medicine? Oh, it's spectacularly useless. One option? Herbal remedies, which may or may not work, depending on whether the person mixing them remembers which plant is medicine and which one is poison. Another option? Prayers. Long, repetitive, exhausting prayers muttered to whichever god seems most relevant. Headache? Hermes. Stomach pain? Demeter. Broken leg? Asclepius if you're fancy, but if you're not, good luck hobbling. And then there are punishments. Justice in ancient Greece is less about fairness and more about who has the loudest relatives. If you steal, if you offend, if you merely irritate the wrong person, your punishment might be swift and public. A beating in the square, lashes across your back while neighbors watch with the casual interest of people who have nothing better to do. Sometimes fines, sometimes exile, sometimes worse. There's no innocent until proven guilty. There's just guilty until someone more powerful gets bored. Disputes spiral quickly. A broken fence leads to accusations of theft, which leads to shouting, which leads to rocks being thrown. If you're lucky, it stops there. If you're not, knives appear. And suddenly the gods are blamed for yet another entirely human stupidity. And the village, being small, remembers everything. Every fight, every insult, every goat-related dispute. Grudges ferment like sour wine, passed down from father to son until nobody even remembers what started them. And looming over all of this, war. Not glamorous wars with trumpets and shiny armor. Petty wars. Neighboring villages clashing because someone grazed goats on the wrong patch of land. City-states flexing their egos, dragging farmers into armies that march until their feet bleed. The battles are chaotic, bloody, short, and utterly pointless. Spears jab, shields crack, people fall, and when it's over, nothing has changed except the list of widows. Heroism here is mostly survival. If you come home alive, you're a legend, not because you did anything glorious, but because you managed not to die from dysentery on the way. Death is casual, constant. A neighbor vanishes after a raid. A cousin dies from infected blisters. A child fades from fever. No one has the energy to make it poetic. Grief is raw, practical, squeezed in between chores. You cry, you bury, you move on. Because the goats still need to milk and the fields don't care that you're heartbroken. It's brutal, and it's boring, and it's exactly what life looks like without antibiotics, without police reports, without the illusion of safety. And yet, somehow you endure. People sing at funerals, wail in groups, hold rituals to soothe the dead and the living alike. Priests wave incense, mutter about gods who never answer directly, and life trudges forward. Because it has to, because stopping isn't an option. It's ironic, isn't it? The myths tell of gods with thunderbolts and heroes slaying monsters, but the reality of violence here is a fever, a lash, a spear in the wrong place. Less cinematic, more exhausting. Less legend, more paperwork of pain. And yet, for the people living it, this is myth. These moments, these struggles, these losses, this is the texture of their lives, stitched into the fabric of memory. You, lying in your scratchy bed, don't feel heroic. You feel sore, tired, maybe scared. But to your descendants centuries later, you'll just be the brave ancestors. Funny how that works. The night deepens. You hear footsteps outside, maybe just a neighbor, maybe not. Dogs bark, goats shuffle nervously. You curl under your blanket, praying the dark stays quiet, knowing it rarely does. Welcome to the myth, stripped of glamour, soaked in sweat, and sharpened by fear.
The day bleeds into night, not with fireworks or cinematic sunsets, but with the slow dimming of light until everything turns gray, then black. There's no electricity to flip on, no glowing rectangles to distract you, no neon signs to convince you that life is exciting. The sun sets, and the village shrinks into shadows. Fires are lit, small, smoky, uneven, throwing more gloom than glow. Smoke stings your eyes, the kind of sting that makes you cry without the dignity of sadness. Inside the house, preparations for sleep begin, though sleep is a misleading word. It suggests rest, comfort, refreshment. Here, sleep is more like surrender. You sit near the hearth, squatting on the same uneven stool that's been wobbling since breakfast. A clay lamp flickers weakly, fueled by olive oil. Because of course it is. Olive oil runs this civilization like caffeine runs yours. The flame dances in the draft, shadows leaping on the walls like nervous ghosts. Dinner is nothing new. Bread again, maybe beans, maybe some leftover fish that smells more like regret than nourishment. Everyone eats silently, exhausted, chewing mechanically, staring at nothing. Conversation is minimal because words are expensive when energy is gone. Children doze mid-bite, heads lolling, crumbs stuck to their cheeks. Adults mutter short prayers, sometimes out loud, sometimes under their breath, bargaining with gods for another day of survival. After dinner, the chores continue. Because yes, there are always chores. Animals must be checked, tools stored, embers stirred to keep the fire alive through the night. There is no relax and binge watch. The closest you get to entertainment is staring into the fire and pretending the crackling logs are telling you a story. Spoiler, they're not. They're just burning, slowly, the way your patience burns too. And then the rituals of fear. Locks don't exist. What exists is barricading your door with whatever heavy object you own and praying no one decides to test it. The night is full of threats. Thieves, raiders, stray animals, neighbors with grudges. Dogs bark outside, their howls dragging goosebumps across your skin. Every sound feels magnified. The creak of wood, the cough of your brother, the whisper of wind against the walls. Sleep feels far away, yet inevitable, like a storm you can't avoid. The bed calls, though, again, bed is a generous term. Straw pokes your back, wool itches your skin, insects crawl freely because you're not the only one trying to get comfortable. You scratch, toss, sigh, and eventually give up pretending it's cozy. Children pile together for warmth, adults curl under thin blankets, bodies pressed awkwardly in shared space. Privacy is a fantasy reserved for gods and kings. Here you hear everyone's breathing, everyone's shifting, everyone's dreams whispered in restless murmurs. You try to relax, to let the day slide off your shoulders. But your mind clings to worries like burrs. Will the crops grow? Will sickness strike? Will war spill into the valley? Will the gods notice you in the worst possible way? Myth tells of epic quests and divine adventures. But the real nighttime adventure is lying still, heart racing at the sound of a twig snapping outside. Still, there are small comforts. The fire glows faintly, painting the walls orange. The smell of smoke, though harsh, feels familiar, like a stubborn friend. The rhythmic sound of crickets drifts through the cracks in the walls, reminding you that at least the insects are consistent, reliable in their annoying chorus. A neighbor sings softly, off-key, some half-remembered hymn, and the sound floats through the night like a lullaby. And slowly, despite the discomfort, despite the fear, sleep approaches. Not luxurious, not restful, but enough. Your body is too tired to resist. Muscles heavy, eyelids heavier. You surrender to the scratchy blanket, the hard straw, the creaking house. Tomorrow will be the same. Fields, hunger, sweat, disappointment. But for now, there is a fragile peace in this shared exhaustion, this communal collapse into darkness. This is the myth of sleep in ancient Greece. Not heroic, not poetic, but deeply human.
The night in ancient Greece is never just night. For you, it's darkness, a chance to sleep, maybe to scroll on your phone until your brain melts. For them, it's a living thing, a place filled with whispers, gods, spirits, omens. The dark is not empty, it's crowded. Crowded with your fears, your ancestors, your gods, your imagination. Every flicker of the lamp, every rustle outside feels like a message from somewhere you don't want mail. Dreams, especially, matter. You don't just dream nonsense about being late for an exam you forgot to study for. You dream of gods, animals, symbols. A snake in your dream? A warning. A bird flying overhead? A sign. Your brain, desperate to make sense of boredom, turns sleep into a cosmic email service, and everyone around you treats it like gospel. Wake up sweaty from a nightmare? Congratulations, you've just received divine spam. Someone will interpret it for you, usually an old man who smells like garlic, and he'll insist it means you should avoid fishing on Thursdays. Nightmares are serious business. If you dream of falling, you don't shrug and blame it on bad cheese, you panic. Clearly, Hades has sent you a reminder that gravity exists and you're mortal. If you dream of drowning, Poseidon is angry. If you dream of flying, Hermes is messing with you, or worse, preparing you for a trip you don't want. Dreams here aren't entertainment. They're warnings disguised as nonsense, and people cling to them like weather reports, except less reliable. Superstitions fill the night like smoke. Don't leave your sandals upside down. Bad luck. Don't whistle after dark. The spirits hear you. Don't speak the names of the dead out loud. They might answer. Everyone knows someone who ignored these rules and paid the price.
usually by tripping on a rock or losing a goat. Coincidence? Never. Always divine punishment, never human clumsiness. And then there are the gods. Always the gods. Watching, judging, meddling. You mutter a prayer before bed, not because you believe it will help, but because not praying feels riskier. You toss a crumb of bread into the fire, an offering to Hestia. You whisper a plea to Hypnos, god of sleep, begging him for rest without visions of disaster. The irony is not lost on you, begging a god for the most basic biological function. Yet here you are, talking to the ceiling, hoping some immortal is listening between scandals on Olympus. Omens creep into every corner. An owl howls at the wrong time. Athena is displeased. A dog howls at the moon. Bad luck. A sudden gust of wind. Zeus is in a mood again. Everything is loaded with meaning, and the meaning is usually bad. You can't just say, the wind picked up. You have to say, the gods are angry. The line between weather and divine tantrum is as thin as your blanket. The night stretches long, and without clocks, you measure time by discomfort. The fire dims, the insects buzz louder, someone snores like a dying boar. You shift, scratch, sigh. Every sound is amplified. A twig snaps outside. Is it a thief? A wolf? A neighbor sneaking home late? Or is it something worse? Something mythical? Something with too many teeth? You'll never know because you're too afraid to check. Better to lie still, eyes closed, pretending ignorance is safety. And still, sleep comes in fragments. You drift, dream, wake, repeat. You dream of fields that never grow crops, of gods demanding sacrifices you can't afford, of endless roads leading to nowhere. You wake, heart pounding, listening to silence, convincing yourself it was only a dream. Then you drift again, only to repeat the cycle until dawn. This is the night in ancient Greece. Not peaceful, not quiet, but full of tension, imagination, and the gnawing certainty that the universe is against you. And yet somehow you survive it, night after night, finding just enough rest to drag yourself back into the misery of morning.
Morning comes again, dragging you out of the swamp of restless dreams into the very real swamp of ancient Greek daily life. The sun peers over the horizon like a nosy neighbor, and already the village is buzzing. Today is market day, which sounds glamorous if you imagine tidy stalls and charming vendors. In reality, it's chaos disguised as economy. You walk to the marketplace, sandals slapping against the dust, feet already protesting like underpaid workers. The market is a stretch of dirt road lined with makeshift stalls, planks of wood balanced on rocks, cloth spread on the ground, baskets overflowing with whatever people are trying to get rid of. The smell hits first. Fish that has been dead too long, cheese that could double as a weapon, herbs crushed underfoot, and of course, goats, because goats are the unofficial soundtrack and perfume of Greek civilization. Vendors shout, each louder than the last, convinced volume equals quality. Fresh olives, though they look suspiciously wrinkled. Fine pottery, half-cracked already. Fish, just caught, if by just you mean sometime this week. It's a symphony of exaggeration, a carnival of over-promises, and you, with your handful of coins, are the unwilling audience. Bartering is the sport of the day. Prices are not fixed, they're performance art. You ask the cost of bread, the baker names a number so outrageous you nearly choke. You counter with an insult disguised as an offer. He scowls, pretends to be offended, but secretly loves it. The whole thing is theater, both of you actors in the world's oldest sitcom. Eventually, you settle on a number that still feels unfair, but at least you walk away chewing something vaguely edible. Money exists, yes, but not everyone has it. Coins clink in a few pouches, but most trade is barter. Goat cheese for pottery, olives for cloth, labor for fish. It's like an endless yard sale, except no one wants what's being sold, but everyone needs it anyway. You watch neighbors haggle viciously over the price of beans, as though beans are gold. And here they are. The social life of the market is half the point. Gossip flows faster than wine. Who's marrying whom, who's sick, who's been cursed, who's been blessed, who looked at whose goat suspiciously. Rumors spread like wildfire. Unverified, exaggerated, delicious. You learn more in 1 hour at the market than you'd ever want to know. And none of it helps you survive, but all of it makes life feel less monotonous. The petty tricks are everywhere. A vendor sprinkles water on wilted vegetables to make them look fresh. A fisherman arranges his dead catch so the least rotten ones are on top. A potter sells cracked jars, swearing the line is just decoration. Buyers know they're being lied to. Sellers know, buyers know, but the dance continues. Honesty is a luxury no one can afford. And then there's theft. Not glamorous heists, just children with sticky fingers, slipping figs into tunics when no one's looking. Sometimes they're caught, chased, smacked, lectured. Other times they get away, vanishing into the crowd with grins wide enough to shame Hermes himself. Everyone pretends to be scandalized, but secretly they admire the skill. The market is also the stage for politics, though politics here looks like loud men shouting about things they don't fully understand. Taxes, alliances, complaints about city officials. You nod along, trying to look informed, but really you're just wondering how long until you can go home and collapse. Still, you cheer when everyone cheers, boo when everyone boos, and hope no one notices your lack of enthusiasm. By midday, the sun is merciless, baking the square until the air itself feels heavy. Flies swarm, children cry, tempers flare. You clutch your purchases, bread, olives, maybe a dubious fish, and retreat, exhausted by the sheer noise of survival disguised as shopping. You're poorer, sweatier, but somehow satisfied. This is life. Buying, selling, trading, gossiping, and pretending it all matters more than it does. The market fades behind you, replaced by the quiet of your home. The day's excitement is over, and by excitement, of course, I mean mildly different chores. You drop your goods, wipe your brow, and remind yourself this will happen again and again and again until you die or someone invents supermarkets.
Life in ancient Greece isn't solitary. It can't be. Survival depends on community, whether you like the community or not, which means you are constantly tangled in a messy web of neighbors, relatives, distant cousins you never asked for, and gods hovering overhead like nosy landlords. Let's start with religion, because it's the glue that holds this entire social chaos together. Festivals are the highlight of the calendar, the rare moments when people trade sweat for spectacle. They arrive like a thunderclap, announced by priests who insist the gods are particularly needy this month. Everyone gathers, dressed in their least wrinkled tunics, which is like saying they put on the sack that smells slightly less of goat. The air fills with music, pipes wheezing, drums pounding, voices chanting in a rhythm that makes sense only if you've been drinking since dawn. The smell of roasted meat drifts across the square, tantalizing, because most days you don't see meat unless it dies of old age in your yard. People cheer, laugh, stumble, sing. The priests wave incense, mutter prayers, slaughter animals with a solemnity that is supposed to impress the gods, but mostly just impresses the hungry villagers who can't wait for the feast. Sacrifice is theater and dinner rolled into one. A bull lowered with chants, blood spilling in patterns that the priest insists are meaningful. To you, it looks like blood. To him, it's prophecy, omens, messages from Olympus. You pretend to nod wisely, though really you're just waiting for someone to hand you a slice of roasted goat leg. And when it finally comes, greasy and smoky, you gnaw like you've discovered heaven, which is ironic because technically you're bribing heaven with your appetite. But the festival isn't just about gods. It's about people. Families forge alliances in the corners of the square, whispering about marriages, dowries, fields. Fathers eye potential sons-in-law like they're livestock. Mothers parade daughters in their cleanest clothes, hoping someone notices. Marriages here aren't love stories, they're transactions, carefully negotiated over wine cups while the young people stare at the ground and pretend not to exist. You watch this unfold with the awkward realization that your future could be decided over who owns the better patch of olives. Romantic, isn't it? Gossip, naturally, thrives. Someone danced too enthusiastically, clearly drunk. Someone prayed too long, clearly guilty. Someone wore a tunic with suspiciously bright dye, clearly flaunting wealth. Every gesture is dissected, every misstep becomes legend. Entire reputations rise and fall based on whether you tripped during the procession. Forget Instagram scandals. Here, your clumsy sandal strap is enough to fuel months of whispering. And then there are competitions, because humans cannot gather without deciding who's better at something pointless. Running races, wrestling matches, poetry recitations. Men strip down, oil themselves like shiny statues, and grapple in the dust while the crowd cheers. You clap along, pretending to care, but mostly wondering how no one slips and breaks their spine. The winners are praised as heroes, given wreaths, sometimes free meals. The losers? Forgotten instantly, swallowed by obscurity, which is probably the kinder option. The festivals bleed into night, torches flickering, music louder, wine flowing like there's no tomorrow. People dance in circles, arms linked, stomping until their sandals fall apart. Children weave between legs, laughing, stealing bites of food. Lovers sneak away into the dark, pretending the gods aren't watching. And through it all, you stand in the crowd, surrounded by noise, sweat, smoke, and the endless certainty that this too is myth. Not the kind carved into marble, but the kind that lives in memory, ordinary and overwhelming. By the end, you're exhausted. Your stomach is heavy, your head light, your ears ringing. You stumble home, back to your scratchy bed, knowing tomorrow the festival will fade into chores, fields, and disappointment. But for one night, you lived in a story bigger than yourself, even if the story was mostly about goats and gossip.
The days blend. They don't march forward with purpose. They don't unfold like chapters in an epic. They smear together like spilled wine on a cracked table. Wake, work, eat, worry, sleep. Repeat. Time here is circular, not linear. The myths tell of destiny, of fates weaving threads, of gods shaping lives. But for you, destiny looks suspiciously like repetition. The gods don't need to punish you with storms or monsters. They punish you with routine. Every morning, the same rooster screams in the same tone of personal hatred. You rise from the same bed of straw, itch at the same blanket, strap on the same traitorous sandals. You trudge to the same fields, squint at the same stubborn soil, curse the same rocks that sprout faster than crops. At midday, you chew the same bread, sip the same sour wine, sigh at the same sun that refuses to be merciful. Back at home, the same chores, sweeping dirt off a floor made of dirt, patching clothes that disintegrate faster than you can repair them, stirring pots of beans that taste like yesterday's beans because they are yesterday's beans. Children repeat the same shouts, neighbors the same complaints, elders the same stories. The repetition is so thorough, you begin to wonder if the gods are lazy, reusing the script of your life because writing new material takes effort. Even festivals repeat. The same dances, the same chants, the same sacrifices. Different goat, same knife. Different bride, same marriage negotiation. Different gossip, same scandal in new packaging. You almost admire the creativity required to recycle boredom into tradition. Almost. The seasons shift, but even that feels like a loop. Summer burns you, winter freezes you, spring teases you with growth before disappointing you with drought. Autumn collects the remains of your hopes. Each year you swear it will be better, each year it isn't.
And yet, somehow you keep going. You convince yourself there is meaning, that routine is purpose, that monotony is stability. Because the alternative, the thought that nothing matters, is too heavy to carry. This is the cruel genius of myth. It turns repetition into significance. A farmer plowing the same field his father plowed isn't just stuck in a cycle, he's fulfilling tradition. A woman cooking the same meal her mother cooked isn't trapped, she's honoring heritage. A village repeating the same rituals every year isn't bored, it's faithful. Myth is the paint that covers monotony, making it look like destiny instead of despair. And maybe that's the secret. Maybe repetition is survival dressed up as story. Maybe without these loops, without these rituals, without this constant recycling of the same gestures, the whole fragile structure would collapse. You can't have chaos every day. You can't fight monsters every morning. You'd be dead by lunchtime. So, instead, you fight boredom, which is the slowest, quietest, most reliable monster of them all. So, you keep going. You rise, you sweat, you chew, you sleep. And though you don't notice it, though it feels the same, tiny changes creep in. A wrinkle deepens on your face. A child grows taller. A tool breaks and is replaced. Time crawls forward, even when it feels like it's standing still. And centuries later, someone will call it myth, as if it was special, as if it was different, as if you weren't just living the same Tuesday again and again. This is the real myth of ancient Greece. Not gods, not heroes, not monsters. Just repetition so endless, it becomes legend.
And now, the moment you've been waiting for, or at least the moment I've been pretending we've been building toward, the so-called climax, the grand unveiling, the big finish that, spoiler, is neither big nor a finish. But you've earned it, haven't you? After trudging through fields, chewing stale bread, sitting through gossip and festivals, and the eternal monotony of Greek life, surely there must be something more. Surely the story rises to a point, a peak, a revelation. Surely the curtain lifts and behind it is something? But let's not rush. Rushing would be disrespectful to the art of wasting your time. A true climax is not about speed, it's about delay, about circling the mountaintop endlessly, pointing at every tree, every rock, every goat on the slope before maybe, just maybe, glancing at the summit. And even then, deciding to describe the clouds first. So here we are. Imagine yourself standing in the heart of ancient Greece, the air heavy with dust, smoke, sweat. The world is quiet, except it isn't. The quiet is layered. Distant animals, whispering winds, the low murmur of neighbors arguing about beans. You're at the edge of something important, or at least something pretending to be important. But before we get there, let's talk about goats again, because goats are everywhere, in fields, in myths, in your nightmares. They bleat like broken horns. They stare with rectangular eyes that suggest they know secrets you don't. If this were a myth, the goat would suddenly speak, revealing prophecy. In reality, it poops on your sandals. And that, dear listener, is the true climax of most Greek myths. Disappointment wrapped in animal droppings. Still, let's not dismiss the grandeur. Picture the temples rising on hills, columns tall, gleaming in sunlight that doesn't care about your existence. Priests chant, incense burns, sacrifices bleed. The people gather, wide-eyed, believing they're in the presence of gods. And maybe they are. Or maybe they're just in the presence of tradition dressed up as divine drama. Either way, the spectacle feels climactic, because humans crave climaxes the way they crave bread that doesn't chip teeth. And what of the gods? You expect thunderbolts, transformations, miracles. Instead, the climax reveals them as overgrown humans with divine powers and terrible impulse control. Zeus can't keep his toga on. Hera can't keep her temper down. Poseidon sulks. Athena lectures. Dionysus drinks until the world spins. Olympus is less a palace of wisdom and more a reality show with better costumes. The climax, then, is the realization that the gods are just as boring, just as petty, just as repetitive as the mortals below. The only difference is that when they throw tantrums, mortals die. But let's stretch this further. Imagine standing in a procession, torch in hand, chanting words you don't understand, moving step by step through the dusty streets. The night glows with fire, the air thick with smoke, the crowd sways. Your arm aches, your throat dries, but you keep walking, convinced that at the end of this road, something grand will be revealed. You turn the corner, heart pounding, expecting a vision, a miracle, a god descending in radiant light. Instead, it's another altar, another priest, another goat. The climax is always another goat. The revelation is that there is no revelation, just repetition in ceremonial clothing. And yet, your heart beats faster. Why? Because humans are wired to believe in peaks, in turning points, in climaxes. You tell yourself this moment matters, even if it looks suspiciously like last year's moment, and the year before, and the century before. You believe because belief is the only fuel that keeps you moving forward through monotony. The climax is not truth, it's the hope of truth, the promise, never delivered, that there's more than bread and sweat and goats. Let's pause here, because a true climax always pauses. It teases, it stalls, it leans in close only to whisper something unhelpful. Like this: the greatest secret of Greek myth, the truth hidden under layers of repetition, is that life was boring. That's it. No thunderbolt, no epiphany, just the slow grind of days polished into legend by people desperate to believe they mattered. And still you listen, still you wait, because maybe, just maybe, I'll give you a revelation after all. Maybe I'll tell you that behind the monotony there was magic, that ordinary farmers walked past nymphs without knowing it, that fishermen wrestled sea monsters in silence, that every cough, every sneeze, every stubbed toe was part of a divine plan. Maybe I'll say that the gods cared deeply, that every sacrifice, every chant, every dream was noticed. Maybe. Or maybe I'll tell you the truth, that the climax of Greek myth is the same as the climax of your own life. You wait for the big moment, the meaning, the payoff, and it never comes. You keep waiting, you keep working, you keep chewing stale bread and convincing yourself it tastes better than it does. The climax is endurance. The climax is realizing there is no climax. And somehow that realization is both devastating and liberating. So, here we are at the summit of anticlimax. You expected fireworks, and I gave you goats. You wanted thunder, and I handed you stale bread. You hoped for revelation, and you received repetition. But that, truly, is the essence of myth. Not the dazzling stories carved into stone, but the dull lives lived endlessly beneath them. And maybe, just maybe, there's comfort in that. Because if they could survive their endless, boring climax, so can you.
And so it ends, or at least it pretends to. Because in truth, nothing here ends. Not the monotony, not the goats, not the bread that refuses to soften no matter how much wine you soak it in. The story drifts toward its conclusion like a tired farmer at the end of harvest, slow, dragging, reluctant. You think, for a moment, that the tale will wrap itself neatly, tie a bow, offer you closure. But this is ancient Greece, Closure is a luxury. What you get is more of the same, just slightly rearranged. You lie in your scratchy bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. You've trudged through fields, endured festivals, survived gossip, dreamed nonsense, chewed bread until your jaw screamed, listened for gods that never answered. And now, in the darkness, you wait for rest. The fire has died to embers, glowing faintly. The room smells of smoke and sweat and faint despair. You sigh. This should be the moment of peace, but even peace feels recycled, like you've done this 1,000 times before, because you have. The conclusion of Greek life is not revelation, it's repetition. You thought the climax was the high point, but the conclusion is the return, the loop, the cycle. Tomorrow the rooster will scream again, the sandals will rub again, the sun will burn again. You'll chew the same bread, curse the same rocks, listen to the same myths told by the same tired voices, and somehow you'll call it life. And here's the irony. This is the part of the story where you're supposed to feel enlightened, where I, the narrator, hand you a nugget of wisdom polished by centuries. But what wisdom is there in boredom? What lesson hides in stale bread? Maybe this. Survival itself is the story. The repetition, the routine, the endless grind, that was the myth. Not gods, not heroes, not monsters, just humans, tired and stubborn, refusing to stop. You might think, that's bleak, and you'd be right. But it's also oddly comforting, because if they survived it, so can you. If they endured monotony, illness, hunger, gossip, sandals, and goats, then surely you can endure your own brand of monotony, emails, traffic, bills, the eternal suffering of your Wi-Fi cutting out. Different struggles, same survival. Their myth was boring, yours is digital, but both are still stories we tell ourselves to keep going. And still, you're waiting for the end, for the final line that says, "Sleep now." But why rush? Endings are overrated. Let's linger. Let's circle the drain of this story a few more times because ancient Greece would want it that way. They never ended cleanly either. Their myths always bled into others, looping endlessly, never quite done. So why should we be different? Imagine, once again, the rooster waiting to scream at dawn. Imagine the bread waiting to be chewed. Imagine the goats plotting your annoyance with eerie patience. Picture the market, the gossip, the sacrifices, the festivals all queued up like bad reruns of a show that never gets cancelled. That's tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. This isn't just the conclusion, it's the preview of all conclusions. The cycle never ends, it just loops. And maybe that's the secret gift of this story. To lull you, not with surprise, but with predictability. To rock you to sleep with monotony. To remind you that nothing is urgent, nothing is racing ahead, nothing is demanding you stay awake. The story is slow, dragging, looping, and so is life, and so is sleep. So here, at last, we let it fade. The voices of neighbors soften, the animals quiet, the fire dies, the gods retreat into silence, the myths dissolve into the hum of crickets. You close your eyes, surrender to the cycle, and drift. If you liked this story and want to hear more, subscribe to the channel. Sleep well, or at least sleep boringly, which really is the same thing.